Did you know that the video games industry is bigger than Hollywood? The video games industry globally is actually larger than both the movie and the music industry. I know everybody's familiar with the fact that the video game sector continues to grow. However, maybe you didn't realize just how large it was. It has a total addressable market of over $200 billion that's forecast to continue to grow into this next decade and beyond. And of course, all of these enabling technologies like 5G, better phones, better different devices and next generation consoles, and of course, Web 3.0 are only going to continue to catalyze the growth of the sector. Well, today we're going to unpack two of the top ASX video game stocks on the market. Both of these have had really fascinating past periods with some significant and transformative news flow that positions them really well to ride the tailwinds of this sector. And for those who are interested in Web 3.0, blockchain and the Metaverse, both of these companies are actually dipping their feet in fact quite enthusiastically increasing their exposure to these trends, while actually still continuing to focus on their core offerings for now. So they've got an eye on the future while continuing to deliver and develop what they're currently doing really well. It's a fascinating sector with a lot to unpack. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Make sure you've subscribed and turn your bell notifications on as well so you won't miss any of those daily episodes. And welcome. I guess before we dive in and unpack both of these companies, talk about the specifics of what they're doing, their offerings, and the opportunities that they're trying to feed into. Let's take a step back and have a think about the video game sector. If you're not too familiar with it, there's a lot of different phrases that maybe you're not familiar with intuitively. From AAA titles to esports or the Metaverse, what do these mean? Let's try and distill these down because I think they'll actually help to feed into the conversation later on in this video. So firstly, AAA titles. It's an unofficial ranking system, but really AAA titles just refer to the best titles. They've got the largest budgets, the best graphics, the most development, and of course, the most eyes on them. Some examples of AAA titles include Call of Duty, Halo, Skyrim, AAA sports games like FIFA or NBA 2K. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have indie games that are developed by independent studios. And it can go as little as just one person working in the basement on one computer, or you have independent development studios that are working on games as well. But you just have to think of these at either end of the spectrum, from AAA, the most polished and refined and the largest budgets, to indie games on the other side. And then of course we have mobile gaming. Mobile gaming initially started out fairly unrefined, fairly unnuanced, but over time the productions have got better and better. I'm sure you're all familiar with games like Pokemon Go, and many of you have probably played games on your own phone, particularly during the virus and the lockdown period over the past couple of years. Mobile gaming has exploded, but it's a sector that will continue to increase. Of course, we know the technology is in our hand, the mobile phones, the tablets that we have, they're only getting more and more processing and compute power, which enables better quality games as well, and more studios are paying a lot more attention to that. Esports is really just electronic sports. I know it's quite an intuitive name, but it's a sector that continues to grow. If you have looked at some of these esports titles, like the League of Legends World Championships or Dota, they're filling out global stadiums and have more eyes on them than many of the leading sports that you'd actually see. It's quite phenomenal. I'd encourage you, if you are interested, to Google some of these World Championships because you might be blown away with the amount of eyes on the esports calendar. And then of course the Metaverse, which just refers to that virtual digital world. It's really that intersection of many of these next generation technologies, from blockchain to VR and AR, of course extended reality. It's a space that will continue to embed with our day-to-day life, from work to play, leisure, and everything in between. And of course gaming is going to be at the core of the Metaverse space as well. It's a fascinating sector. It's primed to continue to grow. I'd love to know your thoughts on it all as well. So drop in a comment what you think about the gaming industry and what are your favorite stocks or your favorite ways to get exposure to this trend. Before we dive in as well, a reminder, I'm just a bloke on the internet who loves talking about stocks. Obviously not a financial advisor, and nothing we talk about is financial advice. The stocks we discuss, they're not buy recommendations, but hopefully they are an interesting starting spot for you to go away and do your own research from. So stock number one on the list is iCandy Interactive. ASX ICI is trading below that $200 million market cap, in between the $150, $200 million market cap level. And really at their core, they developed out initially as a mobile gaming studio. Of course, as we talked about earlier, in the earlier stages of mobile gaming, you might remember some of those very basic games like Paper Toss that we had on our phone. A lot of them were indie developments, but iCandy Interactive were hoping to bring a more professional, refined studio feel to many of these mobile games, and that's what they've been focused on developing. They've really continued to scale this. They now have an award-winning team with a Southeast Asian base, but they continue to expand out the scale of their offering. We'll talk about how they've done this later on in this video. And they also have a bit of a footprint in the publishing side as well, which has only been amplified with an acquisition stake into Storms, which will give them a bit more opportunity to think about both upstream and downstream exposure to the gaming sector. They do have a footprint as well on the esports sector with a stake in an esports company called ESPL. And what's interesting as well, they've also taken a stake into Mighty Kingdom, a smaller games developer on the ASX too. So they've got quite a diversified offering, but I think what's interesting about iCandy Interactive is they really are looking to build out an empire. They've made a range of different stakes and taken a range of different positions in the sector, as well as a couple of big acquisitions, most notably Lemon Sky, which we'll be talking about. But they're really thinking about this longer term future and building a true leading player in the Southeast Asian region. So it's quite a fascinating opportunity that they're trying to feed into. And so that brings us to the Lemon Sky acquisition. The Lemon Sky acquisition has just closed recently. Lemon Sky is a leading player. They're one of the best animation studios globally. They've worked on many AAA titles, many that you might be familiar with if you're familiar with the gaming space, like The Last of Us 2, Call of Duty, Need for Speed, Marvel's Avengers, and many others. So they really do have their exposure and also a range of different connections as well across that industry. If you look at some of the existing portfolio of partnerships from EA, Microsoft, Disney, Nickelodeon, Activision, it really is a who's who of that list. But when iCandy and Lemon Sky come together now, what they're building is a true leading player in the Southeast Asian and ANZ region. They've got over 400 full-time employees. If anyone's familiar with the gaming space, you'll know that there's a real lack of top-tier talent in the gaming space at the moment. And so having over 400 full-time employees ready to work on their titles is a significant tick for validation. What's interesting as well, we'll talk about the opportunity that iCandy is trying to feed into on the Metaverse and NFT side. But with this integration, they're already looking forward to these opportunities. 3 NFT generative art projects, as well as 9 NFT Metaverse gaming projects that they're already beginning to develop. So the opportunities there, they've now got the team, the capabilities in-house. Of course, what's interesting as well, as we talked about where iCandy initially started from, more focused on the mobile gaming side, which has traditionally been known as more of the casual gaming side. Of course, AAA titles are more of those focused and in-depth gaming titles, a lot more robust and larger. When you're bringing these two together and bringing the best of both worlds, it's quite a synergistic acquisition. And so at their core, iCandy is aiming to build a major global gaming company to make AAA titles for the metaverse. Let's try and break down what this actually means. A major global gaming company, it's fairly self-intuitive. But if we think about AAA games for the metaverse, it's quite interesting. Many of these metaverse titles, of course, are still in the very early stages of this Web 3.0 transition. But many of the earliest games in the metaverse and the NFT games and the crypto games are very, very independent. They're indie titles. They, of course, are not backed by studios. And so far, we're still in the very early innings of this. But iCandy has seen the opportunity. And what they want to do is bring over their AAA capabilities for Lemon Sky and target this metaverse opportunity. Of course, we know that as we continue to move forward, gaming studios will try to make their mark and go for the land grab. But iCandy's identified this early, and they believe there is the opportunity to become a major global gaming company, making these titles for the metaverse. And then building on that and really amplifying it was the recent lead investment from Animico Brands. For anyone who is familiar with Animico Brands, they've got over a $2 billion valuation. They really are a leading player in this blockchain investing space. They're a VC fund and they've got a range of different stakes and investments to many leading blockchain companies. So of course, they've got the capabilities and the knowledge in-house, but it also opens up the Rolodex and the network that iCandy will be able to integrate with, to work with, and this will help them to scale faster, scale more efficiently, and ultimately open more doors as well. It's significant backing. They're putting their money where their mouth is, and it's going to be really interesting to see what this can unlock. For those who are familiar with the crypto gaming space, Animico Brands, of course, has a subsidiary called the Sandbox, and many people might be familiar with what the scale of the Sandbox has already achieved to date, and of course, this is only still in the very early stages. And then on to company number 2, Playside Studios. ASX PLY is the largest video game company on the ASX by market cap. They have quite an interesting offering and they've been in the news recently with a range of different connections with some AAA leading studios, as well as actually releasing their very own NFT, the first NFT exposure on the ASX, I believe. So they have two core components to their offering. On one side is their original IP. Their core focus is really on creating their own brands, developing their own brands in-house, and bringing out titles. So some of the recent names that you might be familiar with: Age of Darkness, Final Stand, Animal Warfare, and Battle Simulator Warfare. And of course, they acquired the Dumb Ways to Die franchise that came out of Metro Trains. It was one of the largest advertising campaigns globally, won a lot of awards, but they've acquired this IP that they can bring in-house now. And this is actually what they base their Beans NFT off. Then on the other side, they have relationships with some of the largest brands in the world. And so they have these relationships and they're working on developing games with these companies. You can see here some of the titles, some leading names from Disney companies to Lego, Jumanji. We've got relationships upcoming with games with The Godfather as well as Legally Blonde. But they also have a few work-for-hire arrangements with some of these studios and opportunities with companies like Activision, 2K Games, Shiba Inu, and of course Facebook. So it's quite an interesting dual-sided offering, and it does give them quite an opportunity on both sides of the coin. And so I think just thinking about this work-for-hire component first and foremost, a couple of these are actually really fresh pieces of news flow. The Activision announcement and the 2K Games announcement, both of these companies, leading global companies. I'm sure you're familiar with Activision and 2K Games. Activision is behind Call of Duty. 2K Games is a subsidiary from Take-Two. Take-Two is obviously responsible for the GTA series, among many others. And then Shiba Inu, I think what's most interesting about this aspect is it shows the ability for Playside to do work-for-hire development across interactive entertainment. So not only video game studios that they could work with, but of course they have the opportunity to work with influencers as they've previously dipped their toes into, but also a range of other different types of interactive entertainment. And as video games become more and more mainstream, as they already are, but you can think about a range of different companies. Maybe it's an airline company, maybe it's a supermarket company, or any of these other types of companies that want to engage with a younger audience base that might come to a company like Playside or iCandy Interactive or any of these other companies to develop integrated and interactive solutions to engage with their audience base. And then Playside Studios, as we mentioned, did acquire the Dumb Ways to Die franchise for just over $2 million in cash. You've got a range of different assets as part of it, 6 freemium games that have been released already, 5 premium educational apps, the assets, the brand assets in terms of the characters, the songs, the trademarks across the world, as well as the social media accounts. And the first thing that they have actually chosen to do with this, which was a very, very fascinating one, is launch their Beans NFT. As mentioned at the top of this discussion, I believe this is the first NFT exposure with an official launch on the ASX, so it's quite an interesting one. The Beans NFT launch actually had quite a successful launch, $8 million in net revenue. There was a bit of a technical issue at launch, which cost them under $500,000 to repair and fix up, but it's still quite a sizable launch. And of course, what's really interesting about the Beans NFT launch is they recently had a capital raise with Playside, and as a result of that, they're establishing a dedicated Metaverse and Web 3.0 component or Web 3.0 team within the Playside studio. They want to continue to pursue these opportunities. This roadmap here, you can see Beans Pets, 3D avatars. What's really fascinating is an MMO or a Metaverse game, which is NFT driven. How these can interact together is going to be really fascinating. But I think what's interesting on this component as well is that, of course, Playside have acquired Dumb Ways to Die. They've got this roadmap up ahead for the Beans NFT. But of course, it's not inconceivable to think now that they're well funded after the capital raise, that they could continue to acquire licenses for different types of games. And of course, they could develop these in-house or also work on different types of agreements to help other brands as well bring out their NFT launches. The real opportunity or the golden opportunity in this space is revenue shares. And as companies like Playside can continue to do work for hire types agreements to bring out their own companies' offerings in-house, if they could revenue share for some of these large NFT launches and if they're successful launches, the opportunity in the longer term is quite a fascinating one to say the least. And so just having a look at the ASX PLY revenue growth over this past period, this was for the past quarter, which is excluding the recent NFT launch for Beans. As mentioned, that was just around that $8 million of revenue, of course, before the technical issue. But you can see here, the last quarter, they recorded $5 million of revenue. You can see the split here. In the blue, it's the original IP, so that's the in-house developments. And then in the orange, it's the work for hire. Of course, they've recently brought in 2K Games as well as Activision Blizzard for work for hire. It'll be fascinating to see if they can do these successfully. They get good validation there. They have good success. Of course, it's likely that these could flow through either to further deepening relationships with these studios or other studios as well that would like for some further work for hire. But of course, with this quarter now, adding on the Beans NFT launch and any further growth, you're talking well over that $10 million revenue mark. It's going to be very fascinating to see what happens for ASX PLY. And so just bringing that discussion all the way back to the top. Firstly, if you have enjoyed the video, don't forget to share it out. Make sure you hit the like button. And if you're new here, make sure you've subscribed and turn your bell notifications on. You'll be updated every time we drop a new daily video. But the gaming industry, it is a fascinating one. There's many different components to it. Of course, not all games are made equal, but these companies both have the opportunity to have exposure to many of these trends as they continue to play out moving forward. It's going to be a very interesting year into 2022. The gaming sector, as well as the broader digital sector, through 2020 and 2021 has had a significant catalyst. People working from home, living at home, under lockdowns, they were looking for entertainment, and the gaming sector really had a significant catalyst in terms of demand, as well as in terms of investment. So the next decade is going to be an interesting one. It's already at a $200 billion TAM, and it's not inconceivable to think that we could see it multiples ahead of that over the next 10 to 20 years. Thank you so much for joining us. Let us know your thoughts. Drop in a comment below about where you think the gaming sector heads. Hope you enjoyed the video. For now, stay well and happy investing.